Hello, and thank you so much for joining me for Technique Tuesday. My name is Sharon Rogers, and I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator from Wells, Maine in the United States. And every second and fourth Tuesday of the month, I bring you a free online class. I have designated the second Tuesday of the month as Technique Tuesday. So for this month, last month, and I don't know how many more months, we're going to be focusing on certain techniques and less on stamp sets and dies. So you'll be able to use these techniques with the stamps and dies that you have. So don't feel like you have to have all the supplies that I have. I'm just teaching you some new techniques. Last month, we began our Technique Tuesdays with watercoloring, and we're going to do some more watercoloring this Tuesday. The watercolor technique that we're using today involves a spritzer. It will create a bit of a muted pattern in the back, and then once it's dry, we will get a drier, more distinct image in the front. And you can see it on page 119 of your catalog. This is what we're going to be doing. I'm going to be using the Painted Lavender set. This set was the focus of my spring retreat, and it was just a lovely set to work with, especially because it had the perennial lavender 12 by 12. And did you know that this paper is one of the very few papers Stampin' Up! Has carried over from one catalog year to the next? It is that pretty and that gorgeous. So it is still available, and we will use a little bit of it in just a minute. I'm going to bring in, we're going to be using the big lavender leaves here. And also, oops, and I just dropped it on the floor. And also the stems that go on those leaves. Now for this, I like to kind of get a rough idea of placement by just standing them up next to each other. This looks pretty good. So I'm going to try to aim for about 1/4 of an inch, maybe 3/8 of an inch from the top. This is a half sheet of watercolor paper. So the Fluid 100 watercolor paper. It's a beautiful cold pressed cotton watercolor paper. And the first thing I'm going to do is get out my inks, and I'm using, because I'm going to be using the Designer Series paper as well, I'm going to use the colors that are in that paper, and that is Gorgeous Grape and Pretty Peacock. Highland Heather is also in there, and you could certainly bring that out as well. But the watercolor is going to lighten the shade anyway, so I'm starting with the darkest colors. So what we're going to do is ink this up. Then I'm going to stamp this right on the top. And I just put my arm in my ink pad. So that's fun. I have now purple on my arm. And then we're going to stamp the stems in Pretty Peacock, which is one of my favorite colors. All right. So we have that, and I see I got a little bit of an edge over there as well. Batting 1,000. I'm going to bring in my water spritzer. So a water spritzer is the tiniest little vial of water with a little spray at the end. And so I always want to find the hole, make sure it's pointed away from me. And we're going to spritz that over the top. And you can see what's happening, right? That's just spreading, spreading, spreading. And depending on which direction you spread or you spray is how it spreads. Now, if you get a big blob that you don't really like, you can take that off of there pretty easily. I'm gonna take this one out. That's an errant spray. You know what? I probably can pick up most of this by spraying it and just dabbing it. All right, I'll probably have to trim that down a little bit. Okay, and if you bring it back down, kind of bring it over, if it's starting to pool in different areas that you don't like, you can do that. I may have sprayed a little bit extra. But you get the idea of what's going on here. Now this is a pretty detailed line art in the bottom, but it's still spreading. You can also kind of help control the spread a little bit with a water painter too, if you wanted to. Like if you wanted a certain direction for it to go, you can kind of do that. And, you know, let me just bring you back in here a little bit, but you don't have to. But that's how you get to that muted background look. Now we're going to let this dry and come back to it. Now the spritzer is certainly lots of fun, but what happens if you don't have a spritzer? Well, you probably have a paintbrush or a water painter handy, like we used it quite a bit last Technique Tuesday. And so what you can do is bring that in. I'm starting with a dry piece now, and I'm priming my paper. So I'm getting it quite wet. All right, and then let's stamp over it. Stamp over that water. Actually, I probably should have had my ink pad ready to go because this does tend to seep in there pretty quickly. So if we have it all wet and then we stamp it, you can see that's the effect that you get. So different effect, but pretty much the same technique that we're going for. We're just adding lots of water and getting those images to kind of spread and lose their detail. So I can come in with the other stamp, and I'm going to get the ink off the edge of there. Try not to get it on this time, which I did. So that's what happens when I mount it crooked. Okay, and because this has probably lost its ability to spread a bit, I'm gonna just put that in there, put a little bit more water, ink it up, get rid of the excess on the corner. And there we go. We will set this one aside and come back to it once it's dry. Okay, we're back. I went to the movies and now everything is completely dry. I do like to, as I mentioned in the last watercolor tutorial, that I do like to let it dry naturally because it really does retain a better shape. Oh, and I'm stamping in the wrong color, so I don't want my stems in purple. Let's fix that here. What I'm gonna do is bring in my lavender flowers, and I'm going to stamp over the top. And what I can do to create a fuller bouquet is to stamp again, even without re-inking, puts a little bit more in the back. But even if I do re-ink and just kind of switch up the angle a little bit, it gives a fuller bouquet. Let's do it on this one. Now you'll notice that this one is a lot darker. That's because the paper was not nearly as wet as it was over here. You can get a very similar effect both ways. I just had a lot of water here and not as much water here. So this is definitely more of a watercolor look, and some people like it a lot and some people can take it or leave it. So there we go. Let me bring these up. You can see then that we have that watery background that's got the overall shape, and then we have the detail on top. Just for a little bit more of an artistic impression, if you will. I'm going to go ahead and cut this down a little bit. For one reason, I need to get rid of that ink over here that I don't want. I don't want to cut it down too much because I don't want to interrupt the, the spread of the re-inker over here. I'm not even really measuring too much. Just seeing about how much would be the same on the other side. There we go. So we have something that looks like this. Now because this is a very thick paper and it's cotton, it's going to shed a little bit. So I just use my fingernail to get those edges a little bit neater. I've brought in a piece of the painted lavender paper or perennial lavender paper. And this is cut the same dimension as a card front. So I can choose to just do something like that, or I can cut this down just a little bit. Maybe make it 4 by 5 1/4 instead. And then when I put it on here, I can put it at a slight angle. Looks like I probably need to change out my blades in my paper trimmer. So if I do something that looks like this, where I'm getting the corners to touch on the corners of the or on the edges of the card, then I have something that looks like this, where I can see both the purple and the peacock coming from around here. So I think that's kind of what I'm going to do. And I do need to decide, do I want this on an angle? And I think I'm going to put this on an angle as well. So let's go ahead. And you can do the same thing on this one. I could have cut it down even a little bit further. I don't know if I will or not. We got a couple more projects to do here. So let's see here. Let's get my little pokey tool out. I didn't close up my glue tightly again, so I gotta pay the price. Have to unclog it. There we go. So we've got that. And let's go ahead and just put this on an angle. It's a little bit thicker cardstock and it's got a little bit of a bend to it, just a slight one, because it was wet and it dried. So I'm just taking a little bit of extra time there, and I'm going to Do the same thing here. Just put some adhesive all around the edge. And just make sure we've got points touching edges here. Or do I want to go the other way? It's probably too late now. It's too late now because I've already got the glue down. So we'll just go this way. Now, the one thing that the Painted Lavender set doesn't have is sentiments. If you don't have a really good sentiment set, that is a suggestion for you. You want to really get one. Now, I think one of the things I'm going to bring in here is some bling to dress this up. And we have these beautiful purple fine shimmer gems. They also carried over. I've got a few partials because I used these in another project here. So let's see what we're gonna put on here. I suppose we should put on, before we do anything, we should put on a sentiment. So let's go ahead and grab a sentiment. All right, I'm going to bring in Comforting Thoughts, and I thought perhaps I'd use the I don't have all the right words to say sentiment. And I'm bringing in a piece of the fresh freesia, and I'm going to stamp on that with the gorgeous grape ink that I've been using. That color looks really nice on the fresh freesia. And then when I bring this in, I can bring this into the side and make it straight across here. I can bring it over all the way to the edge. I think I'm going to do that. And I'm going to pop it up on dimensionals. And I'm really going to use 3. Just to make sure that center stays popped up nicely. So there we have our sentiment. And now let's go ahead and add that bling that I was mentioning earlier. So there are three different sets of purples in here. This goes a little bit more with the Blackberry Bliss. It's a little bit not quite the right tone. So either one of these would work really, really well. So I'm gonna put one down here, and we'll put one over here, and then I think we'll put a smaller one and maybe a lighter one right up here. So you can put on some bling, even on some cards that are not necessarily, you know, happy and joyful cards. They just add a little bit of accent. But of course, if you feel more comfortable in leaving that off, you should. Now to finish off the inside, I'm just going to take a piece of basic white. And here's a piece that measures 4 by 5 1/4. I will bring in my Pretty Peacock ink and the stem image. Put that right down here in the lower left corner. And then I will bring in that same lavender bouquet image and stamp that in the gorgeous grape again. So there's still room to write something. Sometimes it's really hard to write when, you know, I don't have all the right words to say. What are you going to say inside? It's probably going to be difficult. So taking up some room with a larger bouquet probably solves a little bit of a problem of what do you say. And so now we just adhere that to the inside. Oops, coming out a little fast over here. So when there might be some globs, and there's that little guy that was clogging the hole, so I'll take him off. Just spread it around with the tip a little bit, get it a little bit thinner. That will save you some bumps on the inside. There are a couple other sentiments in this set that would make for a nice inside here, but I'm just going to leave this. All right. So one of those other sentiments might have been, there is no good card for this, or wishing you comfort. I mean, there's lots of nice little words in here. But here is our watercolor card. And this is what I did with the other watercolored image. So I still had one of these backgrounds, 4 by 5 1/4, and I mounted it straight on the Gorgeous Grape cardstock. I cut down the sides of this because the ink wasn't spreading as much on this one, so I could. Moved it over to the side and added a stitched circle. So I love my stylish shapes dies. I think they are fabulous for lots of different labels. And I just pulled that out, cut a piece of fresh freesia with one, and stamped For You, which came from the Layering Leaves stamp set, which has a lot of just really, really great general sayings that you can add to some cards. This is a nice basic set. And so these are the two cards. Look very different, but pretty similar techniques. All right, let's take just a quick TV timeout here to explain to those of you who may be new how you can get the supplies to recreate 2 of each of the cards that you've seen tonight. Now, this class is absolutely free to watch, and I hope you watch it, enjoy it, and learn something. But if you would like the supplies to create 2 of each of tonight's cards, and those by supplies, I mean the paper and embellishment supplies only, then all you need to do is place an order of $35 or more in my online store. You can find the link to my online store in the description of this video. If your order is $60 or more, and that's before shipping and tax, as was the $35, then I will also include a package of embellishments. And provided they do not go on back order, the embellishments for this class will be the brass butterflies. I just love these brass butterflies. They're flat, easy to mail, and easy to use, and they dress up so many different cards. So that's it. You will also be emailed the tutorial, the written tutorial that will have all the measurements and instructions, and also the link back to this video so it's easier to find. All right, let's get back and see a new technique. All right, for this next project, I'm bringing in a piece of thick basic white. I'm not using the watercolor paper, but you certainly can for this technique. I don't want to use regular basic white because it's a little too thin, and whenever we're using water, the thinner it is, the more it's going to buckle and warp. I'm bringing in a clear block, and this is the D block, so it's not quite square. It's a little bit taller than it is wide. And I'm bringing in 2 inks. I'm bringing in a balmy blue and an old olive. I'm going to take my block and stamp it directly into my ink, picking up a fair amount of the balmy blue. Now, I'm not sure if you can really see it here. I think holding up that paper lets you see that I've got a little bit more than half of the image being blue, or half of the block being blue. I'm going to bring in my old olive pad, probably could use a lighter green here, but I wanted it to be one of the warmer summer greens. And I'm going to find where that line of blue stops and then ink this in with my old olive pad. Now, right now I see that there's a little bit of line separating them. I probably don't really want that. So there we go. Now it's all inked up. I'm going to close up my inks. You're going to use your spritzer that we used on the last project a little bit, or one of the variations anyway. Find the nozzle so that you're not spraying yourself, and you're going to put some ink or put some water right on there. I'm gonna rub this off so I don't get it too wet. You can see that things are starting to move already. I want my sky up at the top. And so I'm gonna just put this down here, and you can see already what's happening. That green is taking over. All right. But we have what really is going to amount to land and sky. So we've just kind of got this unique little image, and it's going to be different every time you do it. If you use less water, you get something that looks like this. If you use too much water, you might get a drip somewhere else. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this dry completely. If you're impatient, go ahead and use the heat tool. I think I'm impatient right now, so I'm going to use my heat tool. And my Glass Mat Studio is heat proof, so I can heat right directly on it. It's a nice flat surface, so it will help it stay as flat as possible. If you wanted a slightly lighter color, you might have perhaps used, instead of the old olive, maybe either the lemon lime twist, which is kind of a much brighter green, or soft sea foam, which is very subtle. Now, can you see how much my paper is warping a little bit? You can help that flatten out a little bit if you also heat the back side. So it's still warping, but it's pretty consistent, and I'll just be able to glue that down. That's why I prefer to let it dry naturally, because then it doesn't warp at all. All right, so now it is completely dry. I'm going to get out my my stamp. I'll be using one of the stamps from the Painted Lavender set. I'm going to use this one right here, and I need a nice black ink. So I'm going to bring in my Memento Tuxedo Black. I'm going to go for a silhouette effect here. So there's a lot of green and just a little bit of sky. And then what we can do is just lay this right on top. Looks like I didn't ink a little bit of it very well, but okay. So there we have that. I think we need a little sentiment here. Let's go ahead and bring in that Comforting Thoughts stamp set. And maybe, you know what? I have somebody that I'm going to send this to. Hope this is a feeling better kind of day. Which one is that? That's this one right here. And I'm going to stamp that one in black as well. There we go. So this piece that I had started on, it's getting swallowed up a little bit by this, so I'm going to trim this down just a little bit more, and then I'm going to add it to a thick basic white card base. Let's go ahead and trim this down just a little bit more. So I'm going to do 1/4 of an inch from the top. I'm going to do 1/4 of an inch from this side. There we go. And now when we bring in a base of thick basic white, I'm going to have white on white. So it's a very, very clean looking card, very simple, but it's letting the message really speak for itself. I'm going to go ahead and add this with dimensionals. You probably want to do more rather than less, just because it might still be a little bit warped. So I'm going to say, 8's probably good. I love using dimensionals. Dimensionals really make a difference, I think. And this white on white. White on white is a favorite of mine. For a while, I did white on white Christmas cards all the time. And so we have a pretty simple note card. And if you wanted to add something a little bit special to it, you could bring in the brushed butterflies. Let's see. I think these brushed butterflies are one of the best embellishments that Stampin' Up! Has had. They're so flat, but they're so cute and adorable. I'm going to put one off there. I'm going to put another one here. And then I'm going to put a larger one right down there. There we go. Pretty easy card with a watercolor look. For this last card, we're going to go back to our Fluid 100 watercolor paper because we're going to be using quite a bit of liquid. And I have brought in some waxed paper. Now I could just do this directly on my glass mat because that's not going to, the water's not going to hurt anything here. But you also probably have wax paper at home, and so you can use that. If you have one of the super duper big blocks, you could do this technique on that, something that's a little bit larger at least than the paper that you're using. I'm using a half sheet of the Fluid 100, so it's 3.5 by 5 inches. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in some reinkers, and I'm bringing in 2 colors that sort of belong in the same family, Pretty Peacock and Summer Splash. And I think those 2 are going to look really nice together. You could try some other colors. You just want to be careful that you pick colors that when they blend aren't going to be gross together. I'm going to put just a couple of drops from a reinker on my wax paper. Now, honestly, I'm using the cheapest wax paper, and I do not like this wax paper. It's super thin, and it's not very waxy. And you can see that it's already kind of going through in my wax paper. So don't cheap out. Don't buy a name brand. That's all I'm saying. I'm going to bring in my spritzer, and I'm going to add some water. And hopefully, let's see, it doesn't look like I added much at all. So we're just gonna add some more. And they're not mixing too much right now, but what we're gonna do is we're gonna lay this down onto there. And I'm just going to tap it in different spots to get some of those reinkers to spread a bit. And let's see what we get when we pick up. So we get something like that. That's kind of cool, but it's not nearly as big as I want it to be. What I'm going to do is I'm going to lay it back down here a little bit, pick up a little bit more. All right. So you can do this until you get something that you like. All right. Here we go. And you don't have to cover the whole thing. Now, let's move this. See how this is such cheap wax paper? Like, you're certainly not going to use this in a place where you really need wax paper. Fortunately, I was doing it on my glass mat studio. All right, so there we have that. And if it's, you know, a little watery in some spots, you can go ahead and you can blot it and take some of it away. That helps speed the drying process for sure. I think that's a beautiful watercolor look, by the way. I think it looks really a lot like water. All right, there we go. Now we're going to let that dry. Okay, now that it has dried, I've brought in some glimmer paper, and I was experimenting, and I was using the Happy Birthday dies from the Wanted to Say dies collection, which has a bunch of different words in it. Happy birthday, celebrate, some standalone die cut images, feel better soon, and you're too kind. Not only does it have this part that you cut out, like here's the white piece, you can also cut out an outline. Let me show you. So here is the outline portion, and you can simply put you can layer the happy birthday on it so it stands out a little bit more. So I wasn't sure whether I wanted to do white on black. Let's kind of see how that goes here. You know, it stands off nicely. Or would I want to do maybe the sparkly? That doesn't pop off there enough. I wonder if I put it on white, a white background. That's probably too much glitter. So I'm gonna just take this part right here, and I'm going to, you could use them standalone, or you can layer them, and I'm gonna layer them here. Probably would have been a good time to use my adhesive sheets, so I don't have to be gluing all these little parts, but it's not hard. So we can do that. And I just want to line it up as best I can. It's pretty easy to line up and get that to stick right down. And we're gonna do the birthday in the same way. I'm not putting it over all of the letters. Just some. Slid around a little bit there. So what I would probably do is let this glue dry that's over here, and then I would take my adhesive eraser and just erase that. But you get the idea. I can layer this right on here, and I actually cut this piece down to 3.5 by 4 3/4 because it will have a better fit to the card, which we discussed I think last watercolor class. And then we can put that right on there, and see how it's very simple. It's kind of abstract. It just, you know, got a little glitz and glimmer there. It's something different. So if you're always looking for something unique and different, look how easy this card kind of comes together. And you can see that those colors blend very nicely together. You could use some colors that are further apart, and I'll show you that in just a second, but let me finish this card. I know I have some dimensionals already started here. So what's nice is about when you mount the happy birthday on the outline of the happy birthday is you have a lot more sticking room here for your dimensionals. I could have used mini dimensionals too and put quite a bit more on. This over here, yeah, I think it fits. All right, I'll just take that off. And just put that right there. Kind of crooked on there. We'll take our liquid adhesive. Now again, when you're using something that's been watercolored, if it's at all warped, then you want to use the glue and you want to use it all the way around the edges. All right, so there we have that. And because we're using this three-color glimmer paper, which, you know what, I don't even know if that is current. I think it is. It was an online exclusive. So while I'm letting this set up, I'm gonna just go on to my Stampin' Up! Website and see if it is. It is current. I thought it was because I had it in my stash to use. So now we will just adhere this to, I'm choosing to adhere it to a thick basic white cardstock. Ooh, I wonder how that would look though on a card base of, ooh, on a card base of, ooh, I think I like this better. On a card base of Summer Splash. Oop, I can see that my card base is crooked too. I'm gonna need to fix that. Putting my ends together. And then using my bone folder. There we go. So there we have just kind of a different and a unique little happy birthday card with a watercolor technique. And we'll just put something on the inside and make it complete. Okay, I went back and I took some of that glimmer paper and I took another die that is in that Wanted to Say dies collection. And it cuts out these stars, which they come out as one piece, but you can snip them apart to make some smaller star collections. And so you can just put a bunch of them wherever you want. Put a big one down here, and so you can see it just adds a little extra sparkle to the front. I mean, there's a lot of sparkle already on there because of this border, but it's fun. So let's go ahead and just add these, and I think I'm just gonna add them with regular glue because I don't know, I just don't want to fuss with my mini glue dots right now. And I'm gonna let that happy birthday stand out on its own. There we go. I always forget how much I love these dies. I was going through, I was actually looking for another die set that I had no idea where it was. I figured it out, but and so I was looking all over and I came across these. I'm like, oh yeah, I haven't used those in a while. I love those. And there we go. Some abstract meets some, wow. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. I hope you have enjoyed learning more watercolor techniques. Were any of them new to you? I would love to know that. So go ahead and just put a comment down below to let me know which one might have been new and which one you were most excited to try. Don't forget, if you're planning on placing an order so that you can get the class card kit, your order must be placed using the link in the description of this video by Sunday, July 14th, 2024. I hope you all have a great rest of your week and try some watercoloring. It's really not as hard as you think it is.